I'm going to show you guys now what I did for the ivy leaves, and basically any geometry in the scene that is dense I'll proxy out. So we're just going to really quickly go through proxying objects out. So we're going to find those ivy leaves that we made. So I think it was main building ivy leaves, and the liana. We'll turn it on and turn this to full geometry. So these are the ones we generated. And the reason I've not shown the shading on this for the leaves is because I teach this in Create an Atmospheric Environment. So I'd really recommend checking that out. And if you don't end up checking it out, then the shaders and materials are already in the scene for you guys to sort of pick apart. So you can still render it correctly. Okay, so with that said, let's proxy out these leaves. So the first thing you want to do is jump inside. I'll get rid of this proxy. And I'll chuck down a redshift proxy output. We'll pipe that in. We'll go to the archive tab, so we don't need to check anything here because none of our assets are moving. So let's say, for example, our asset was sort of flying, animated and flying across the screen. There we need to tick this enable motion blur. But seeing as though all of our objects in the scene are static, then we don't need to tick this. This also applies if the camera is moving. So let's say the camera is moving forward, then we still don't need to tick it as nothing in the scene is moving. It's only the camera that's moving. So this rule only applies if the objects are moving in the scene. So let's go to the archive tab, and you can leave sock path empty. Where it says the file name, we'll browse $job cache proxy. I made a proxy folder inside here, and I'll call this building main, also main building ivy leaves, and make sure that you add at the end of it .rs map. It's very important. So this may take a little bit of time. It may take 30 seconds or anywhere between 1 second and a couple minutes, depending on how dense the geometry is. So once you've done that, go up to the top and we're going to tick render current frame and render to disk. You could also copy this and paste it into the ivy liana. So paste it there, change the name to liana, and click render to disk. So now that you have those two proxies, you just basically re-import them. So you can go to redshift, add a proxy object, which drops a proxy object sort of right in the middle of your scene. I'll just cut that, so Control X. Just to keep it organized, you could paste it above. I usually color my proxies like a pink color, and I'll give it this name, so main building ivy leaves underscore proxy with capital letters, just so if I try to find it in the scene, I just type proxy and it stands out to me. Okay, so we go to the redshift tab, and under proxy we enable the proxy file, browse for it. So $job cache proxy building or main building ivy leaves, and here you can see it's in bounding box mode. I'll turn off standard geometry, so you can see we've got a box there. We can turn this into mesh, and we've got the ivy leaves meshed out, and just do exactly the same for importing the ivy liana. You could just alt left click, drag this to duplicate it, rename this, keep everything nice and organized, take the one off the end, load in the liana, which is there, and then once you're sort of happy with it, you can put this back to bounding box or none. I usually put it back to none, and this will basically save. So when you add a redshift proxy here or a proxy output, it will basically save all the information in your scene regarding scene materials and also the settings for the particular object, and then it will just proxy it out into a file which is faster for the render engine to call on. So your startup times will dramatically decrease if you proxy your objects out. And there's also no reason to not proxy out the less dense geometry. The more you proxy, the better. It does take a little bit more time to process and set it up, but your render times are really going to benefit from it. So let's say you proxy all of your objects out, and you say, oh no, I need to add some more dust or something onto the plant pots. Well, what you need to do is update the material in the material network, so inside here or whatever, and then you would have to re-export. So you'd have to go back and render to disk again. Alternatively, what you could do is you could select the both of these, and where it says proxy materials, this is currently taking the materials from the proxy file, which is within this RS map file. Okay, so all that information is stored. But let's say, for example, you were kind of getting annoyed and you wanted to keep the proxy, but you wanted to also be able to update the materials on the fly. Then you could change this from proxy to from scene materials. So it's still proxied, but it's reading the materials from your scene. But I'd prefer to keep this from proxy. It will make renders faster. So for a scene like this, I think my startup render times were about maybe like 3 to 5 minutes. With all of the geometry in, there was an insane amount. And there was also the flowers as well. So I proxied most things out and got that down. I got the startup time down to about 1.5 minutes. And when I'm referring to startup time, I'm referring to sort of like the moment you click render. It's when the black screen is sort of showing and it's calculating, computing everything in your scene. That's sort of the startup time before the actual render starts.